My name is Arnstein Eknes. I'm the segment director in DNV for offshore vessels, which include also the vessels for servicing the offshore wind industry. It's a lot of service vessels, CTVs, SOVs, etc., etc. So my role is really to be in touch with the markets and try to understand and predict what kind of trends and development that we can foresee.
Now, Arnstein, you presented here at the Offshore Wind Journal Conference on battery hybrid vessels. I was wondering if you could give a brief recap of your presentation.
I think it's really fascinating, this with hybrid, that we try to merge the best of 2, 3, or 4 different systems together. So that the challenge in shipping today, and in particular in the renewable industry, is that we have to develop an industry which is predominantly renewable, and then we have to consume a lot of the fuel which is coming from fossil while doing it. When we are consuming fossil energy, there is an opportunity to do that more efficiently and having more robust and resilient systems. And that is where batteries are coming in. So the batteries are like a catalyst for saving energy. They are a tool that can help you to run your existing engines more efficiently. And by doing that, they're also taking down the use of having fuel on board. So when you have a battery involved in a power plant, which is more conventional, then you are helping your power plant to operate smoother, maybe go more optimum, use less emission. You improve also the operability with regard to responsiveness of the system, because batteries, they love to have instantaneous power changes, while traditional diesel engines, they don't like that. So I think this dualism of traditional engines that need power and works fine, robust over time, like a Maritime, is very different from the battery capabilities, which is to give immediate power and be very responsive and be there when you need them. You don't need time to ramp it up. And that's the opportunities when you're looking at that space is actually to reduce the fuel consumption, which make it then easier next time if you want to go from a traditional fuel to an alternative fuel. Because all the alternative fuels today, they require actually more space or more volume on board the vessels. So to be able to cope with less energy on board, that's a goodie. And that is what the hybrid vessels are plugging into.
Now, you also highlighted the fact that from 2019 to 2023, the number of vessels equipped with batteries has doubled. Well, what's driving that uptake?
The key driver, I would maybe say 2 key elements. One of them is that in certain areas where you can have near coastal or well-defined routes, like for ferry connections or for tugs, typically operating out of one port, or offshore vessels, which are often operating in one geographical area, you know where they are operating, then it's possible that they can use more shore power. They are also normally having a trading pattern which facilitates the use of battery. For instance, ferry crossings in Norway. We have a few hundred ferries that are suitable candidates for having fully electrical systems on board, because they also have access and availability of green electricity on both sides. When your country is powered by renewable energy, then it makes sense to utilize the most out of it. And that is the case in Norway. So that's a big driver. But outside Norway, I would mainly say it's linked to those areas where you see that the hybrid battery systems inside a pocket, inside a defined user group like PSVs, inside a defined user group where you're using a lot of DP vessels, where you need not only to have the power and the endurance, but also the resilience and redundancy. If you're going to do that with engines, then it means that a lot of the engines' running time will be at low speed, low power, and not in particular efficient. If you can combine a battery in the same context, then you improve the condition for the power plant, you reduce the emissions, and then it becomes a cost saving also for the charterer. So for the charterers asking for battery systems, that is one of the key drivers we have seen, in particular for the offshore segment, for PSVs, in particular also for SOVs. I could mention, John, that about probably all of the new SOVs that are on the order book now, they have been signed with battery system in hybrid with some kind of alternative fuel, which is very interesting development.
Now, you also mentioned for owners of battery hybrid vessels that they should be on top of their data. What do you mean by that?
Being on top of your data means that you understand how you actually operate, how you actually use power on board. What are the consumers? What are the power consumers? And which consumers are needing power at the same time? I think in the past, a lot of the vessels, they were designed with regard to a maximum installed power that you needed. That can be for reasons of safety, but also for endurance. And maximum, you can say a worst case, assuming that you have all the consumers connecting at the same time, how much power do I then need? But if that vessel is operating in a condition which are benign, then you will hardly need the power capacity. You will only use a fraction of it. And when you do so, then you are kind of installing the wrong power. You never really get to use it, but you create a lot of emission and associated downsides, which you don't want to pay for. So when I say being on top of your power, really, how do you operate? And how does your crew operate the ship? Because the technology today is more advanced than before. Are you able to identify what is the best practices if you don't have data? Are you able to see who is actually the best performer with regard to emissions, with regard to running hours, with regard to producing the most attractive business case? If you don't have these data, it's more difficult. But with the data, you can actually identify what can I do on my consumption side with regard to tuning, new equipment, or maybe new practices. And you're able to make better investment decisions when you're going to replace your fleet. And then you can put the money where it should be with regard to having efficiency on it. So the effectiveness of the whole system. Without having data, then we are guessing. And guesswork is simply, why do we have to do guesswork now when we have digital tools, when we can connect this information? And in most cases, the information is available on board the ship, but it's maybe not connected and made available, streamed to shore for those that can analyze it. So this is all about connectivity and data collection, and then seeing what can we learn from analyzing the behavior. What can we learn from understanding how technology is being used?
Now, of course, all these battery installations are being paired with an internal combustion engine. What about the next step? What about pairing a battery with a fuel cell?
That's a very good question, because if you have a conventional engine today paired with battery in a hybrid setting, imagine that you're replacing that engine with a fuel cell, and the fuel cell is typically not enjoying to go up and down in power consumption the same way as an engine is. The fuel cell likes stability. They like a predictable behavior. It takes time to heat it up. It takes time to really have an efficient flow of energy. And they don't like the quick changes in energy output. While the battery is the opposite. The battery have no problem to have quick changes in energy output. So if you are driving a hybrid car and you are pressing the accelerator and you expect the power to be there, that will come from the battery, even if it is a fuel cell driven engine. But when you're up in speed and when you want consistency and keep the speed over time, then the energy is coming from the fuel cell, because then it's delivering on a constant level. So the combination of having two systems, one of them enjoying to be producing stability and the other one loving to handle variation and flexibility, I think that's a perfect match. So for me, fuel cells and battery, that they also belong together.